Now you're going to start combing the forehead hair, this curly and very tangled hair. So what I'm actually going to do is split this on a different guide groom. This workflow will keep everything more organized and easily to visualize. The way I do this, I duplicate the original guide groom, the one that's already a custom one and it's unlocked. And when I paste on it, and I'm going to rename it, and I'm gonna give it a different color. So my head now is going to be blue to match our actual guide colors. And when I cache reset stroke, it's going to reset any previous combing I did on the head. And I'm gonna paint it yellow to match the current color node. I like to keep it this way to make things more organized and easily to visualize. When I start having 10 of these different guide groom nodes across an animal, it will make more sense. Now to start combing, I'm gonna delete all the guides that he has. And you can quickly see if all the guides are selected whenever you middle click on top of the node and see how many primitives it has. So it is still got some in there. And now got nothing, so all of them is gone. Notice that some very old versions of Houdini, you needed to leave at least one guide in order for these nodes to work. On newer versions, you don't need any more, so you can completely clear this node from guides and start planting from scratch. Now I'm going to start combing those nice curls. And the process is super similar on what I had before while combing the head. This is like the blocking of it and will probably change over time, but it's nice to get it started at some point. On my parting lines, I'm actually, this whole forehead area is not symmetric. So we're not going to use a mirror neither for the guides, neither for the parting lines on the forehead. So it also makes sense to split our parting lines in two groups. One with the mirror, in this case for the head, for the face, and the other one without mirror for the forehead. And we can have as many parting lines groups as we want. It's very flexible. And I like to use the parting lines as well to start establishing blocks of hairs. Even if I'm going to delete them later, it will help me visualize better whenever I'm on the initial phases of planting guides and combing them. As soon as we actually add our hairs on it, all this parting will make much more sense. And notice how I use the length visualization all the time. Whenever you start working with longer hairs with more complex shapes, it's easier for the new planted guides to interpolate with a smaller length than the ones around it. So that's why it's important to keep an eye on it all the time. And I also going to increase the segment count. Since those guides are longer, I will probably need more segments to make them bend around more nicely without missing enough resolution. And you can have different segments count per different guide groups. And I start adding guide by guide and giving some shape to him. Notice how the left side is very different from the right side. Although in our picture one of the ears is lifted, which of course makes everything super different, it is still very different from one side to the other. And then I keep adding guide by guide and combing them. Notice that this area that intersects with the ears, the hairs kind of jump out of it, making a nice shape. And I also have this little tuft that comes forward on the very front of the forehead, and I keep adding more and more, and some of them I manually clump them together, so in the end we will have larger clumps converging to a single point, which is quite nice because normally clumps are formed by other smaller clumps. And I'm not gonna show combing guide per guide since it's a very similar process everywhere, just an overall view of how it's done. In this case, I'm starting refining some of these shapes and defining where the main clumps are on this big curly hair. And it's a slow process, as everything related to groom requires a lot of patience, but it's totally worth the final result. You can have a very fine control of each one of those sections. And obviously for the full body, I wouldn't do this guide per guide, but this forehead is an area that draws a lot of attention, and for this case I prefer to put some manual work on top of it to give a nice shaping. And on the rest of the body, I would use a more procedural approach to create the curls on that. So now that we start expanding the amount of nodes we have in here, everything is looking like a mess. So I'm going to start cleaning up this and organizing. So we'll keep more like a professional look on top of it, and easier for anyone that needs to pick up our scene, knows how it works and how are the labels of everything. So first thing, I'm gonna get rid of the sketched nodes. We don't need it anymore at this stage, so we can completely delete it. And what I'm going to do is get rid of all these wires crossing everything. The way I do this is I drop a node connecting the skin, and then I use object merge. This is like an invisible wire that connects one node to the other. And the beautiful thing is that we can plug it directly to our guide groom, and we get rid of the wires connecting it. This is not mandatory, but in the end I find it makes much easily and clear to visualize everything. And I'm also going to plug the skin output directly in one of these. We don't need actually to process all the guide grooms in order to get our final skin, so this makes the process quicker whenever you want just to paint a map or something. And the same thing we did with the skin, I'm gonna do with the guides as well. I'm gonna drop another null node and connect our guides to it. And using an object merge, I'm going to connect everything, and I'm gonna put it on the top view away from the rest. And whenever I start having model updates, the stop organization will start to make sense, because whenever you change it to a new model, you have to project and have the old and new versions of skin to make it work. Now I'm gonna merge all your guide groups, and the final result going to the guide output is the guide partition, which basically merges all your parting lines with our guides, setting the proper attributes on it. I'm gonna push the skin VDB output out of the way, because we won't really manipulate it at this level. And on this part is where I'm gonna actually paint attributes. So I'm gonna leave a whole section dedicated to it. I'm gonna talk about painting attributes on the next videos, and there will be a lot of information about it. And I like to give boxes and colors as well, so you can easily spot from far away what is every single box. And organizing a scene is super important for someone that is going to take your scene to continue your work, or for yourself, if in case you need to open it in like a month or two. It will be much easier to understand what you had on your mind back then. And I always keep my scenes very similar way in terms of organization. So if I already combat 10 different animals, their nodes are going to be roughly in the same position every time. And we can use an object merge for the skin in case we need to do a skin transfer. Since this is not the case yet, I'm going to leave it connected directly to the skin input. And now we're going to duplicate the forehead node to create the ears combing node. And it's the same process as before. So we're going to reset strokes and paint it on a different color. Ones are going to be pink, and I'm going to paint the nodes to match the guide colors as well. And this is going to be symmetric to the other side, so I'm adding a mirror as well. And now that you see that something funky is happening, that's because that object merge is pointing to the wrong thing. It's supposed to point to the guides, not the skin. Sometimes when you copy and paste a node, it doesn't actually copy properly, so just be careful with that. And now I'm going to template your parting lines. And we're going to do the same thing as we did with the forehead. Delete all guides and start combing all over again. Just check. There's 2, 3 in there. And now we go. Now we're going to start combing our ears. And it's the same process as the rest of the body. And this is longer hair, like the forehead area. But it's a little bit different because go following the contours of the ears all the way downwards to the bottom of that. And notice that we can quickly jump between combing like the face and the forehead in a single click. We can switch guide groups super easily. And then we continue combing it. And then if you try to use the length visualization and it's not working, just right click on it and make sure the length marker is enabled. Otherwise it won't show up. It happens when you create a new viewport or when you open and close Houdini. And you don't have to create new visualizations for each guide groom node. It works for all of them, no matter how many copies you have. Now I'm going to give the main shapes of how they look like. And I'm following the left ear as well. And whenever you're combing it, if you feel that's starting to become difficult to actually combine on these areas like underneath the ear, we can actually work only with the ear. So first thing, we'll need to select it. If you go to one node and you see that another thing is still appearing, like some ghost guides, just create a new viewport and it will fix the issue. And now that we select our actual skin, we can select only the ear and delete the rest of the face. And just make sure we only have one side, we don't need both because you're mirroring afterwards. And then your brush is going to work more responsibly. And we're actually not going to create guides on the face by accident. But it's still, if you try to comb, you see it's still colliding with the skin. That's because our skin is still visible outside. So we can actually create a visualizer for it. The same way we are previewing those things, we can actually create a new one just for the ears. And this way you can comb underneath the ears without any problems. And you can go back and forth as many times as you wish without losing any work on it. And it's important to know how the guide groom works related to the skin. You can basically disconnect it or crop things apart at any time. And whenever you plug back, it will work normally again. The only thing you can't do if you don't have a skin connected is plant a guide on that. And to finalize this class, I'm going to show a quickly time-lapse of how I did the ears. And it's the same process involved on the forehead as well and on the face as well. It's mostly on the artistic side, comparing the reference image and try to replicate. So it's to actually get better on that. It's more exercise of practicing your observation skills. If you struggle on this part, I strongly suggest studying life drawing, and drawing in general is good, sculpting as well. It can help you see things better. And I myself think that this artistic side is way more difficult to learn and to teach than the actual technical side. Technical, I can easily make a tutorial and teach, but this whole observation and get the right feel of it is super complex and would take years to master it. But even watching the process of how other artists does their job can significantly improve your observation in general. May help you pay attention in things that you normally won't, especially if you have a super technical background. But I like to say that grooming is half and half. So you need to have the technical, of course, but without the artistic side, your grooms are not really going to look good. So it's a tricky balance, but everything can be learned and everything can be improved. Is the key for that is practicing a lot, observation, and of course asking feedback. Feedback is essential. And even the most experienced artists, after they are working for weeks on a single thing, if someone from outside comes and take a look, they might see things you can't see anymore. your eyes get kind of like addicted to that image, and then you can struggle to like notice some things that are pretty obvious, like look at the size of this hair, it should be smaller, or no, these clumps are too big. So always ask feedback. The more you can ask, the better it will be. And it's difficult to accept feedback, especially when you think that your art looks amazing. But it's a good practice to learn how to receive feedback well. It's very necessary on Groom for both like realistic and like more cartoonic stylized one. And it's totally normal if you have to do and redo the same part again a lot of times. It's impossible to get exactly the right shape on the first time. On the next class, when you're actually going to start adding the hairs finally, then you'll see that it looks completely different from what you actually see on the guides. And when we start rendering, it will look very, very difficult from what a viewport looks like. Not in terms of like direction, but in terms of feel. You need to like feel that your room's like fluffy, is it more crispy? And you only notice that when you start actually rendering. But I like to keep every stage of the production very well established. So before actually like adding hairs and start rendering, I like to get my overall flow and combing very well established. I'm not going to like finish my combo right now and never come back again. No, it doesn't happen. But at least my eyes won't be like tricked to think like something already looked good, and when actually the flow is super simplistic and not really close of the complexity of that an animal actually has. So I like to keep every step very well defined, and like adding things like noises and breakup will be the last ever step, because those can hide the flow itself. It will be very difficult to see if the flow is behaving properly or not if we have a lot of freezes and bend clumps on top of that. And I jump between parts all the time. So after working in the ear for some time, you can get tired of that, and then it's good to move to a different area. It kind of like clears your head a little bit about that. And then I come back to do the forehead a little bit, and then back to the ears. So like jumping between the areas can make the process a little bit more pleasant and less tiring. I know nowadays we have a lot of tools that help us like speed up this process, but it's a difficult balance on how much you want things to be procedural, how much you want things to be manually combed. And the truth is you will only learn the right balance ever you did this like a lot of times. And even though at some point you might change your head for a different situation. So it's good to have both workflows very well established in your mind, so you can always have the proper tool for the proper time.